This is episode 100. Welcome to Camera Shake Podcast, episode 100. Right here.
Is it the right way around? Is it the right way around? Well, it's not. It's not. It's spinning. It's spinning. The balloon is spinning.
Currently, it's episode 1.
There we go.
So this is episode 100 of the Camera Shake Podcast. We've made it. We've threatened it from the very beginning.
We did threaten it, yeah. Yeah.
But we've made it. It's episode 100. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it kind of is. I'm pretty sure we had big plans for episode 100.
Yeah,
back in episode 1.
Oh, yeah. Back in episode 1, I think. 1 or 2, we were talking about like throwing a massive party with all of our guests.
Little did we know that it would actually only be now that it would be possible, and we didn't have time to plan.
Yeah, well,
there you go.
Exactly. So instead, we have created a party atmosphere.
Our own party, and
absolutely,
as you can see, no expense spared.
Yeah, all of our favorite things right here.
Burger King, party poppers. Oh, celebratory bar of dairy milk. In fact, should we crack that open? Let's crack that open, shall we? Bar of dairy milk.
Oh, but it didn't even extend to a cake. But there you go.
Couldn't even be bothered with cake. Would you care for some dairy milk?
Oh, why not? Why not?
There you go, some dairy milk. Yeah.
Dairy milk, for our international viewers and listeners, happens to be a British brand of chocolate.
Very nice. Very nice indeed.
Yeah.
Capri.
So, episode 100, man. It's been a trip, huh?
What was that?
It's been a trip.
Sorry. Yeah. I've got chocolate in my mouth.
This is going to sound excellent, exquisite, awesome. So we've managed to stick with it for 100 episodes.
Some 400.
No, 100.
Oh, 400.
Oh yeah, I mean sometimes it feels like 400 episodes. That's probably what it is.
Yeah, somehow, and. We haven't. No, that's a lie. I was about to say we haven't missed a week. We missed 1 week.
Yeah, we missed 1 week. Yeah.
Recently too. Mm-hmm. Whose fault was that, Kay?
That was absolutely entire. Well, actually, it was a storm's fault. I blame. It was an act of God.
Wow.
Well, that's what it is. It's an act of God.
Well, we'll get no insurance for that.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, I feel like we've done. If you think about it, I mean, we've gone to extraordinary lengths to create episodes. Every one time we even filmed in the car whilst we were driving. So for us to miss an episode, I mean, something extraordinary must happen. For us to actually miss an episode, and that was literally nothing we could do.
It has to be said. It has got harder and harder and harder to make sure that one goes out every single week. As lockdowns have come out, as things have got back to normal, work life is returning to normal, all of that kind of stuff. To find time to do that is tricky.
Yeah.
It's tricky, but it's worth it. This is why it's late at night right now.
Yeah, so that's usually what happens.
So my neighbours are very happy with those party poppers going off earlier.
Ooh, yes. Yeah, because we had to practice that several times, clearly. So... yeah, I mean, it was, it was born, I think, the podcast was born at a time when we really had a lot of time on our hands. I mean, in fact...
like all the time.
Like all the time, yeah. And of course, it was literally the thing that helped us, pass the time in the first place.
Yeah. And you look back at it and you think, we had all that time. Why couldn't we make it look and sound better?
Well...
no, it was fine. We've talked about it 1,000 times before. You just get started and you improve it as you go. That's it.
Well, that's it. And I think it has. I mean, it has gotten
lots of change over the last 100 episodes, right?
Yeah.
Last couple of years.
For sure.
It's we've gone through set changes. We've gone through. We were just talking earlier, weren't we? Gone through thumbnail changes on the YouTubes.
Mm-hmm.
We've gone through the way we've done the audio differently too. We've gone through the way we've finally had a guest in person.
Oh yeah. Yeah, true.
After having obviously needing to do it over Zoom, and we'll still do Zoom going forward because a lot of our guests are out of this country.
Sure.
But it was nice to have Dave in person here a few weeks back.
Yeah. What was nice to
Hi, Dave. It
was actually nice to meet up with people.
Yeah.
Whether that was, when we met up with Dave in Wales, for example, or when we met people at the photography show. That was really the first time we were really, really out and about meeting lots of people.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. And, I'm really looking forward to this year's photography show because I know it's going to be awesome.
Had we not had the opportunity to go to the photography show and meet a lot of our former guests and meet new people, we wouldn't have been on Dave Clayton's podcast either.
True. Well, this is another thing. Of course, this is the thing. One of the things that has sort of amused me the most is actually that not only... it's just because we started this podcast, we found ourselves being guests on other podcasts as well, which was the most extraordinary thing, I think. So
feels weird, doesn't it?
Well, it's just what it shows is that the world of podcasting is really very, what's the word? It's like a family, of people, who are into the same thing,
Funnily enough, much like photography in general.
Much like photography, yeah. And I think this is an interesting thing because it's like two circles that kind of cross over. And then you have basically, you have people who are into photography, and then you have people who are doing podcasts, and the photography podcast kind of thing is where it all kind of crosses over.
Yeah.
And it's been quite interesting to kind of get an insight into that world, because when we first started, we didn't know the first thing about podcasting, really.
Didn't know anything about podcasting, didn't know the guests that we eventually had on, and
sure,
know many of them very well now.
The funniest thing about that was that literally it was a matter of, we just made a list, and the headline was something like, wouldn't it be cool if we had this person on the show and this person on the show, and so on and so forth. And then slowly but surely, a lot of that turned into reality, which was really phenomenal.
And when that list ran out, we got Dave on, and such a joke. He'll appreciate it though, I'm sure. I feel bad.
Dave was actually one of the...
It's a joke.
He was very high up on the list.
Yeah, of course he was.
Yeah, so there wasn't an order to the list at all, actually. It was like literally just, names that we could come up with.
Yeah.
I remember when we had Tommy on the show the first time. This has been another really cool thing. I think that, we've had a number of guests on the show several times, and it's like,
I think Dave and Tommy are competing.
Yeah, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dave really wants to win this. I know he does.
Well, Tommy is busy having a baby at the moment.
That's right.
But that being said, watch this space. Anyway, so it's been interesting having different guests on from different areas of photography as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's been one of the highlights for me, really, is to get an insight into all sorts of different genres that that I didn't necessarily have a lot of experience with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
initially,
absolutely.
And it's certainly, it's taught us so much. Both of us, we didn't know how to light paint cars or something, when we started this podcast, and then it was only because of the podcast or through one of our guests that we ended up when we interviewed Dave Cox. It was only because of that we ended up getting into light painting cars in the first place.
That's right.
In fact, the only reason why we had Dave Cox on the show was because I read an article about what he was doing during lockdown on the photography website. And so I picked that up. I kind of thought that's a really cool story. And then it was literally like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we had Dave Cox on the show? And then that happened. And not only did that happen, but it was also through another guest that we had on the show who we just mentioned it as a side comment or something. He goes, "Oh, yeah,
Hi.
Dave Cox,
Good mate of mine.
I know him." Okay, and that's how that So it's interesting to see how a lot of the things kind of came together, and the way they came together, that were completely unpredictable from the start. And yeah, so it's been a ride.
It has been. Can I have a quick aside for a second?
Mm-hmm.
So, totally unrelated. Does my crown look better straight or at a jaunty angle?
Always at a jaunty angle.
Okay, right, fine. Just worth checking. So it's important. It's important.
So it turns out party hats are not a thing anymore. Apparently, because they're extremely hard to come by these days. Hence, slight detour. Well, actually, lunch.
Yeah. So you went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, did you?
Well, you've got to do these things for your art, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, also for also for your heart.
Suffer for the arts.
Yeah. Your heart is suffering.
Yeah. Burger King crowns. Ain't nothing better than that.
I'm so pleased at the effort.
Well, absolutely. So what was like for you, what was the biggest thing for you personally that you've learned through doing this podcast?
For you doing the podcast? Well, it's a difficult one to answer. It's a very, very difficult one to answer. Yeah, there's so many bits that you get used to, I guess, more than anything. I'm not sure how to answer that. That I could talk about this for several hours, or not at all.
Okay.
It's tricky. That's a very, very tricky one to answer because it's, I've learned something from every single episode that we've done, whether that's something from a guest, whether that's something from a comment from someone that's watched a previous episode, whether that's something we've just been talking about on there, whether it's something technical related, what we've just come across as we've been filming or recording the audio. And every single episode has brought about something new in that respect. And I think that would have been tricky to achieve had we not been doing this podcast. Those, 100, 99 different bits of information, if you like, which we learned, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to do that. And this has given us the opportunity to do that. It's funny if you look back at episode 1, episode 10, if you just go in tens, how different A, it looks, B, it sounds, C, our ability to interview or to just be on camera or to just talk randomly is just, you just see it just gets, confidence grows, your familiarity with the process and the way to go about things grows. I'm sure so much of what I'd learn I've unconsciously just taken out into work and done with me, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a number of things. I agree. I mean, I think it's had a really positive impact on things like public speaking or something for me. That's definitely. It's improved my sort of general presentation skills. I think generally, quite a lot. I think it took me about 14 episodes until I could actually listen to the sound of my own voice without getting, totally annoyed.
Yeah.
Because when you hear yourself back, this is the one downside with podcasts in general, or when you record yourself talking, is that your voice always sounds very different from the way it sounds in your own head.
You have to say to other people, "My God, do you have to listen to me? That's what I sound like."
Exactly. And that's really normalized. But it took me about 14 episodes or something to get to that point.
Yeah. I think I was okay with that generally quite quickly. I don't know whether that's because I was at the time more recently, gigging regularly. And obviously you hadn't done that for just a little while up to that point, from music perspective.
Yeah.
So I've get to hear stuff like that a bit more often at the time.
Do you sing in your band?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Well, BVs, but
Yeah, but you're sort of almost like
I'm used to hearing. Yeah. But interesting. That's it's different actually, because I've only started doing that regularly since we've been doing the podcast.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
Well, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Through band circumstance changes, I just haven't needed to do it previously. I could, but now I need to do it, so I do it all the time now.
Right.
That's interesting. I hadn't really considered that like that. Yeah.
I think that's a big thing for anyone, starting a podcast. I think if you're not used to hearing yourself on a recording, then that's odd.
Really
like,
odd.
Oh, what?
It's really odd. It's things you learn as you go. Is judging when the other person is finishing talking or not finishing talking.
Yep.
When the biggest one I find, and this is for both of us for sure, is I'm in an R in. It's the most normal thing to do in regular conversation.
Sure.
And you hear someone do it when you're just having a regular conversation, and you don't even hear it.
Yeah, kind of you blip it out.
Yeah, you don't hear it. But when you listen back to it recorded, it's the first thing you hear.
Yeah.
Certainly for me, and I always have done. And I think this goes back to school, because I remember learning how to do presentation in like my English lessons or something like that, and it would be part of like GCSE. And our teacher used to say all the time, when you're presenting, when you're talking publicly, you're doing anything like that, you must not all those kind of words. There's a word for all of them, and I forget what it is right now.
Yeah, I think that's filler words, isn't it? Or something?
There's another. I'll remember in a minute. See, I just did it then. Didn't even know I did it.
Yeah, I mean,
I've remembered that ever since, and I did our presentation for that, and I remembered it all the way through, and I didn't once do it. And I've tried not to ever since, but it's impossible.
It's impossible to do. I do it all the time, actually. I think that, the funny thing is, I just did that. By listening back to your own voice, you come across, you pick up on certain like speech patterns, and I know. For me personally, I know that there are certain speech patterns that I'm privy to that I hate, about myself. There's a thing where I think you could fall into the trap of being like too overconscious about these sort of things.
Absolutely.
And I mean, one of the things that we do, of course, on this podcast is we don't really edit anything out.
Well, we can't. From that perspective, we can't. From those kind of ums and ahs. Yeah. Because you'd have to cut the video, or if you didn't cut the video, you just cut the audio.
Yeah, it'd be like a lot of jump cuts.
This voice just going, this mouth opening and doing something, or a long silence, because the R fills that gap. Yeah, which is why we do it. I can't stop myself now. But yeah, so it's just. I'm sorry if that bothers people, the ums and ahs, but. I'm not editing that out.
We've just learned not to care about it.
If it was audio only, we would. But I'm not editing the video and the audio totally separately. It's not going to happen.
I do think that even if it was only audio, this again, for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, we also there's an audio version of this podcast on all the audio platforms: Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify, and all the rest of them. It's exactly the same audio track as it is on the video. So there's no extra editing that goes on.
No.
Mainly because
it takes too long.
Yeah, mainly because we're doing this every weekend. We're just simply too busy and we can't afford to hire an editor, basically. No. So I mean, this is the other thing, of course, about this podcast is that we've never really seen it as a way to like make money or anything. No. It was always initially it was literally. What would you call it? Self-therapy.
Yep.
I guess.
It was that. Did it for ourselves. Kept us on track mentally during lockdowns. And became something that we obviously really enjoyed. And turns out, it helps people listening out there as well, and that's great.
I think the greatest.
If someone can take one bit of information from each one of these episodes, I think there's a win.
I think the greatest reward for both of us, I think, is when we get comments from listeners, or we get like responses to things. That makes the whole thing worthwhile. So yeah. Oh my god, that's like you get super conscious once you start talking about that.
Too funny. That wasn't deliberate either, was it?
No, absolutely not. Like once it's in your brain.
I can tell.
No.
Oh, that's so funny.
We're gonna have to start that speech therapy at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But purely from so I mean that's one thing. The other thing, of course, purely from a photography point of view, again, it's been so extremely useful because it's not, I guess, from the very start, we sort of thought, well, there's plenty of podcasts out there and YouTube channels and whatnot, where the main focus is usually on, the camera settings and this and that and the other. And I think we, from the very start, didn't really want it to be that kind of podcast. I think we sort of thought like, well,
there's plenty of other people doing it really well.
Absolutely. And
what else can you bring to that?
And
space?
Also, it might be interesting to look at it from a different perspective. So for us, when we have a guest on, it's actually what's more interesting for us is the person behind the lens.
Mm-hmm.
What makes them tick, and how they think when they create what it is that they create.
Yeah.
That's from a creative perspective. I think that's much more interesting than simply talking about camera settings.
Yeah, absolutely is. Absolutely is. The million videos on any kind of setting or any kind of camera or any kind of technique out there already. And they do a cracking job at it.
Also, I think it doesn't help anyone when, somebody starts talking about some kind of camera that you'll never be able to afford, and some kind of glass that is you're gonna have to sell 2 children and a car to afford. You know what I mean?
Worth it.
Worth it, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not. Who am I to say it's not? But and then you immediately you sort of put off because you think like, well, I can't do that then. And what you find out very quickly is, as soon as you start ignoring all that technical stuff in a way, or the gear related stuff, what you find out is that 99.999% is the creative mind behind the lens. And everything else after that is just simply a tool to help you achieve your goal. And sometimes it's easier if you can afford a £6,000 or $6,000 camera body, and a $4,000 lens. It may just be easier to achieve that, but it doesn't mean that it's not possible.
Yeah. And
otherwise,
there'll be certain cameras that will give a certain look that other cameras don't, and that might be the look you want, and you can't afford that camera to do that. That's fine, but go with what you've got. You don't just work out how to get a look that you like with that particular camera. If you just for example, you take the C70 that I'm using there. I use the R6 to film all the time as well. Was previously on GH5s. I would not have been able to get the look that I get on the C70 on the GH5. Was never going to happen. It can't happen. They're very, very different cameras. They produce their colors and the way they take in information in a very different way. And I could not get that look. Does that mean the look that I could get on the GH5 was worse than the C70?
No,
not at all. Just different. You work to that. I now work different. As I've become more and more familiar with the C70, I get better and better looks out of it. More to my liking, more to my personal liking, and the way I envisage the footage looking, because I know that camera better and better and better.
Well, that's one thing. The other thing is, I remember, when I first started shooting concerts, I shot them on a really cheap APS-C body with a nifty 50, plastic nifty 50 1.8 lens. So really, it wasn't particularly expensive kit or anything. And still I got some really awesome shots. I got some really awesome results. It's harder to do that compared to the camera I normally shoot. But it doesn't necessarily mean I got, worse results. It actually taught me a hell of a lot, doing that way. So sometimes you have to force yourself to work a little bit harder, and it actually benefits you in the long run.
I couldn't agree more. You should learn on, quote unquote, not as good gear, cheaper gear, because it does make you work harder. You have to learn a bit more about technique, I guess, to be able to achieve a high quality image. Whereas if you were to pick out, I don't know, the R3 just for argument's sake, okay, and you go and do exactly the same thing, you will probably be able to achieve that image quicker and slightly easier.
So the interesting thing is, for a lot of the stuff that I do nowadays, especially this is studio kind of stuff, I could shoot that just as well on the APS-C body. Mm-hmm. Absolutely no question. There wouldn't be very much of a difference because really where most of that comes from is, the lighting technique and all that kind of stuff. So it's much more important to learn about that than to worry about ultimately, what kind of camera body you.
Do you know, it might be quite nice to do a little comparison like that one day. We'll set up a shoot of some description. We'll set it up using your 750 and exactly how you would normally do. Get the shot you want, and then we'll leave everything the same, other than switching the body out for a cheap or cheaper APS-C body, just for argument's sake, just something like that.
An Instax camera,
and just try to achieve, just readjust the camera, whatever you need to readjust to achieve exactly or close to the same result.
That sounds like a good idea.
It's just to prove that it's not the gear. The gear, okay, in some instances it is the gear, depending on what you're trying to achieve, but most of the time it's not. It's how you use it.
Yeah, it's really, it turns into a tool, and this is the thing. I think we talked about nail guns some time ago. Do you remember?
Did we?
Yeah, I think it's a good analogy. So basically...
We talked about something that's not photography related. That doesn't sound right.
No, that doesn't make any sense. No, so the idea was basically that, if you're a carpenter and you use a hammer to hammer nails into floorboards, for example, that's quite laborious over time. And then somebody came along and invented a nail gun. And of course, that makes life a lot easier because, it's easier on your wrist. It allows you to nail more floorboards into the floor in a short amount of time, less effort, higher yield of success, all that kind of stuff, or higher success rate. But it doesn't mean that you have to have a nail gun to be a carpenter. It basically just means it makes your life easier. It's a better tool for the job, but it doesn't mean that a simple hammer can't do the job just as well. It just means it takes you longer. That's all. So you have to work a little bit harder, basically.
Yeah.
And I think, a lot of that is true in photography, especially when it comes to lighting. We talked about camera bodies and stuff, but, especially when it comes to lighting, that's really true. You can go and spend a ton of money on pro photo gear, for example, but if you can't necessarily afford that, if it's out of your price range, it doesn't mean that you can't create really awesome, studio photography with, less expensive lights, for example. I think lighting is really one of those, prime examples where you can actually achieve a lot with just speed lights. There are limitations with that in terms of power and in terms of, battery life and all the rest of it. But, for the most part, you're going to be able to create, work that's very similar in standard to like more expensive lights. Again, the advantages of spending more money on your lighting system, maybe that, they sync, you can sync them to different groups or whatever else. And you can do like some elaborate stuff that just makes your life easier. You can remote control them, blah, 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 which means you don't have to walk up to your lights all the time and change the settings. It makes your life easier, but it doesn't mean that you can't achieve the same result with lights that are not radio controlled.
Yeah.
It just takes longer to do that, and it's more of a faff. That's all.
Yeah. Absolutely. I've just been trying to think if there's anything that's not true for. I'm struggling a little. I was just looking at the Satchler head and tripod that we're filming on right now, and I'm thinking if that was just my B3 travel tripod, would this shot be any different?
No, it wouldn't be exactly the same.
No, it'd be absolutely identical because it's static. Now, when you start panning and things like that, okay, the truth is it does make a difference as to how smooth that shot ends up being. With a really good head, it does make a difference. If you have a cheaper fluid head on there, can you still get just as smooth shots? Yeah, you probably can. You're going to have to be very careful how you do it and work to the ability of that fluid head, but you can probably just about get there.
So here's a really good way of summing it up. If you think about all of your gear, right, that you've bought over time, what was the best investment in your view as far as your gear is concerned overall?
Oh, God. What have I got most use out of since I've had it? I mean, I love that C70. I love it. Yeah. It is absolutely spectacular, that thing. You still have to work to get your shots, but what it produces because I've learned the camera so as well as I have now, I can get the shots that I'm intending to get quite quickly. Mm-hmm. But then that tripod's pretty awesome as well. Oh, I don't know. This is difficult. Can I have multiple?
Sure.
Yeah. It's one of those two, though. That legs and head or the C70 has to be.
Right, for me, it's without a shadow of a doubt, it's definitely the tripod. Like spending money on a tripod is, I think, it's one of the things that I've avoided doing for like the longest time, because I always thought like, oh well, it's just a tripod, so and I used to have like a really cheap tripod, for the longest time. But
do you know sometimes you don't realize you need a better tripod until you've got one?
Of course, absolutely, yeah, no, totally true. And, it was, for the longest time, I used to think like, oh, why should I spend like, 500 quid or something on a tripod? Or like...
Unrest.
Yeah. Or like, with the heads, like, you're probably, I don't know, how much I spent? Probably 700-800 quid with the two heads or whatever. I kind of thought like, oh, well, why should I spend that amount of money? And then when I eventually did, I've used this thing now for so many years, and in so many different situations. It's been in the back of the car, in and out, It's been on location, in the studio. I've used it for so many different things that, it's made its money back so many times over, and it's rock solid, and that's the thing.
That's it, isn't it? That's the most solid tripods I've ever. Can you get better tripods? Yeah. Absolutely, you can. Yeah. And, there are occasions where I even set that down. I think, wish this was just slightly more sturdy. But that thing is just cracking. It's light.
Yeah, it's light.
What it is.
That's definitely...
That's worth its, there's a pun, worth its weight in gold right there. Its ability to, because a lot of the work that we do is on the move and we need to move around quickly. And if you're on a tripod, it can be quite frankly, a complete pain in the ass to have to adjust the legs for a particular place. All right, I'll just undo this one, unclip that one, put that one down, get that next one, get the next leg, do the third leg.
Yeah, the mechanism on the Satchler
where that is just, it's unreal. Yeah. So that, just for everyone's reference, what the legs we're talking about here are the Satchler Flowtech, I think 75s. And rather than undoing legs at different portions to extend them or shorten them, this just has 3 clips at the top, where your hands are, so you don't have to bend down. Who has a bad back as a photographer or videographer? Yep. So you don't have to bend down. You just unclip them and you lift the whole thing up and you just push the whole thing down. And you're there. And you clip them back in and you're done. The added bonus is you don't even have to make sure they're level, not even close, if you don't want to, because the head is a ball head. And that particular head, you adjust it in such a way that you just undo a clip, you got a level on it, which you'd expect. You just move it just ever so slightly, and it's perfectly, the whole thing's level. Yeah. Whole thing's level. And it's got a level on the side, so when you're up high and you're looking up like that at it, you can still see the level.
You can illuminate it.
It's illuminated and it comes out vertically as well. Yeah. Rather than just horizontal. Yeah.
That's
actually, it's showing you the horizontal level.
Yeah, that's a very clever
thing, so. Very cool stuff.
That's what I find sometimes with the Manfrotto is a disadvantage, because the level bubble is kind of pointing upwards. And so once you've got the legs extended all the way, then I'm not tall enough.
Can't see it anymore.
I'm quite tall. I mean, I still can't get a good look. I mean, it's great that you can extend the tripod to that extent. It's
super helpful.
But that's just one of the things that's a little bit annoying.
Yeah,
sometimes.
Yeah.
And I don't, there aren't many things, not many criticisms I have with the Manfrotto at all. It's rock solid. Everything's adjustable. Everything's kind of fixable on it as well. That's the other thing I like. And of course you can put as many heads on it as you want. So depending on, I have like a 3-geared head, which initially, I think if you're not used to those type of heads, can be a little bit frustrating. Once you do get...
I always turn the wrong thing when I'm using that head.
Yeah. So once you get used to that, though, you realize all of a sudden that you've got some maximum flexibility, and it allows you to do so many different things, actually relatively easily. So, that comes in handy. That's come in handy in so many different ways. Like, for instance, when, there are times when we have to be in different places when we record an episode, so where we can't be in the same space, at the same time. And what we do then is, we'll film is sort of in portrait mode, as it were. And with that head, it's just super easy. You just flip it over.
Yep.
It's just within a second, you've got the camera in portrait on the side, and it's rock solid. You can lock it all in. Super, super easy, no problem. I always find that on ball heads, I find it quite frustrating because it's never, it's never exact, and you've got to fuff around with it until it's right. With this, is you literally just, you loosen one grip, you swing it over, it's done.
Ball heads are the worst thing in the world. They are such a pain.
Yeah, they are.
They have their place, and
absolutely.
they can be useful, but I find them... It takes forever just to get it level.
You know what I find is that...
And God forbid you want to move it forward and keep it level at the same time and just pan down, tilt down, sorry.
For people who like shooting freehand, but also like the advantage of having more stabilization with the tripod, this can come in really handy, especially when you keep the ball head relatively loose.
Yeah.
But as long as you still have both hands sort of on the camera and you still adjust it, that does give you quite a lot of movement, actually.
Gives you a lot of movement, plenty of stability, right?
But for somebody like me, who I like to have the camera on a tripod, and I like to literally not touch it and move away from it, ball heads are not great.
Yeah.
Pistol heads are kind of cool. I like those too, but I've gotten so used to that geared head that I've got that, I use that for lots of different things. The only thing it's not good for is panning, so it really doesn't work for me for video.
No.
Which is why
that's not what it's designed for, right?
No, of course not.
Yeah, I think it's quite rare for you to be able to get something all in one like that. You know? These fluid heads are really expensive for a good reason.
Yeah, true.
Because it's actually tricky to actually make it fluid.
Yeah.
Anything that you think is a fluid head that's cheaper than like, I don't know, like 400 quid, 500 quid aren't actually fluid heads.
No.
They're built in a different way. I've been trying to think of what they're actually called, and it's escaping me right now. But there's a name for them. Friction, maybe.
Okay.
It's done by friction inside rather than actual fluid. They might have some fluid there, but not full on like that one does, for example. And that's why that's so smooth. That's why it's got such a good counterbalance on it as well. And the idea with a good fluid head like that is that you can set the counterbalance on it so that if you tilt your camera forward to let's just say 45 degrees, so it's pointing down, that's where it's going to stay. You don't have to tighten anything.
Right.
It just stays there.
Yeah.
And same if you point up, it will just stay there.
That's a real advantage.
Oh, yeah. Really makes a difference. And you don't realize it until you start using it like that. Yeah. You realize, oh, right, okay. That's fantastic.
Yeah, no more camera floppiness.
Does make a difference. Does make a difference. And we have had some footage where yours started dropping once because you hadn't quite tightened it just enough. True. Do you remember that? Yeah. That was very funny watching that happen.
Yeah, I mean, that does happen, especially on the video head. I do let go sometimes, and it just flops. But that does happen sometimes. I mean, that really, it just makes me think that we haven't actually. I don't think we've spoken a lot about tripods on this podcast, just generally.
No, oddly, no. Because it's quite boring. It feels like it's a boring topic, doesn't it? It's not. I love it.
I don't. Yeah, me too. I'm big into tripods. I use tripods all the time.
We've got a few different ones between us, haven't we?
Yeah. Well, especially I really like using tripods in the studio. And I know a lot of people like to shoot freehand and everything. That's all cool. But for me, I just find that. I mean, it's maybe because I'm photographing people a lot. I like to be able to move away from the camera and communicate with the subject, rather than always having to hold the camera. So the only thing that I shoot really where I'm shooting entirely freehand is the 3 heads in a row thing. So for that, I'm not using a tripod unless I'm shooting myself, in which case, of course. The camera.
Why is that out of interest? Why is that? Why do you shoot that one freehand?
Because with that, I actually need to be really... Well, first of all, I'm sitting on the other side of the board, so there really is no space for the tripod to be. And it's at that height where if I had to use a tripod, I would have to bend down all the time. So it's really not very comfortable. The way I actually do it is I sit opposite the subject at the same height. And I can just lean my elbows onto the table or onto the board. And I'm the camera is at the perfect height. And what that does is, because with this particular portrait series, there's a lot of movement happening. Like, the person that I'm shooting will kind of move around. They may be throwing up an object, for example, into the air. Yeah. So it might be all that kind of stuff going on. So that it's easier to react when you're holding the camera rather than having it on a tripod.
Makes sense.
So that's really the only reason, but also because, and then it gives me the opportunity or the ability to lean in a little bit or to lean out a little bit, depending on the way the subject's moving at that point. That can be important because remember, the board has a certain width, and so depending on what it is that they're doing, there might be arms, elbows coming slightly out of frame. So if I can adjust that, when I'm shooting, then it just makes my life a lot easier. So that's mainly it. But that's probably the only thing I do that's where I'm not using a tripod from the top of my head. I mean, unless we're on location somewhere and we're doing some stuff. But even when we're doing properties, for example, that's still... I mean, in fact, I think using a tripod is... you can't get around that. Because we do so many, bracketed shots and whatever. So,
yeah, absolutely.
And that's really where having a really rock solid tripod really is a must. Because as soon as you bracket things and then you composite them together, you always have a tiny little bit of movement, between two shots.
Yeah.
That's because, there's movement inside the camera, of course, when your shutter goes. There may be wind or whatever. So there's always the tiniest little bit. But it's easier to sync those or to line those images up.
Yeah.
Afterwards when you compose
Absolutely. And you're looking for that angle. You're not looking for, or maybe it'll just be that. It's not. You're going to sit there and you're going to work out and you're going to set yourself up right, how you actually want it to be. And so I guess it's a little easier to get your verticals right if you're using a tripod too.
Absolutely.
So that, you can set it and forget it.
So what I tend to do with that is, like, especially when I'm shooting some kind of building, or whether it's an interior or an exterior, whatever, what I tend to do is I tend to find the right angle freehand. So I walk around with the camera, I try different positions, different angles, different shots. And once I've found something, I just literally just take a note as to how high above the ground the camera is roughly. And then I set up the tripod to be roughly in the same spot.
That's it. This was about belly button height. This one was about nipple height.
Yeah, well, exactly.
And this one was eye level. Great.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, so that's a relatively easy thing to do. So that way,
I guess that most of your shots are nipple height.
Actually, it's more like belly button height. Because that's how you get your verticals.
Yeah.
Is by keeping the camera relatively low. What you'll find is, in particular, with that kind of photography, the architectural photography, very often, if your camera comes up too high, then things tend to kind of, like, your verticals tend to not be vertical, basically.
Is that because you're always wanting to angle down ever so slightly?
It's partially that. It's also, it's got to do with the fact that the lens is curved and straight lines are straight lines. And so you're going to have to, depending on, it really depends on where the camera is. So your best bet is always roughly about hip height. That's a good starting point. And then, obviously you want to keep the camera perpendicular to the vertical as much as possible, so you get actual vertical lines. That being said, though, your lines are never going to be 100% straight because you have to contend with the curvature of the lens. Yeah. So there's always going to be a need for adjustment in post to an extent. Yeah. So that is, as long as you.
But the closer you get that as you're shooting, the easier that is.
Of course,
it's going to be to do, right?
Yeah.
And you may even be able to auto it.
Yeah, and the thing is, you won't have to crop as much.
Mm-hmm.
So if your verticals are really out of kilter, and you then fix that in post, inevitably you're going to end up with a lot of sort of white space around the edges of your photo, and then you're going to have to crop in. And so what you end up with, actually, something that's not only a much smaller image, but also, of course, in terms of resolution, a lot.
Yeah.
A lot smaller. So that's really that's important. And again, a good tripod really helps a lot with that.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, I forgot what I was going to say.
Drum roll.
So we've done 100 episodes. We've got another 100 coming up. What are we going to do differently?
And another 100 after that.
Well, that's it. What are we going to do differently for the next 100?
Oh, it's a good question. Are you eating the last bit of my chocolate?
No, there's more left.
I'm done. You can finish it.
Right.
I feel sick. Had too much pizza.
Nice.
Yeah, what are we going to do differently over the next 100 episodes? One thing I would like to do is have more episodes that are not here. In the nude, yeah. That aren't here.
Okay.
That aren't in this room. I'd like to have more on the road, episodes, incorporating, perhaps a job that we're on, or just generally just out and about.
Yeah.
Perhaps there's something we can, while we're doing that, share any information or technique
Wisdoms.
Wisdoms that just crop up as part of that too.
Yeah, that's definitely the plan.
I think that'd be great. Yeah, it'd be a bit more interesting for us as well to not just be stuck in here.
Sure.
And in some respects, less setup, which is a win.
Less setup, but more editing.
Potentially. Oh no, we still only have one static cam. Come on.
Oh well, there's that. I think I really enjoyed, having like live guests on the show.
Yeah.
And I'm sure on occasion that's going to happen here, but that's a prime opportunity to meet up with people in the field.
It'd be nice when what I'd like to do is to try and meet guests on a job. And not suggesting it would be part of that job necessarily, but to go there and do the episode at their job, assuming it's feasible, it's with the right client around, it's not interfering with that job, of course. But if that's viable in any way, that'd be great on location with them.
No,
even if it's after the job is finished and they're just packing down, that'd be grand.
And of course, likewise, we like to invite you onto the set with us. When we're on the job.
When we're on the job.
When we're on the job, yeah. So that's, I think, judging by some of the comments that we've gotten, that's, that's people have found out quite interesting. So that's definitely something. There's a number of projects coming up actually over the next few months where there's going to be plenty of opportunity.
Well, we've got a couple of photographers coming with us on next week, haven't we, to the Albert Hall?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to be good fun. Something a bit different for those guys to do. Perhaps haven't had the opportunity to shoot a location like that before. So
that is something we'll come back to in next week's episode, I suppose.
Yeah,
and we'll where we'll talk a little bit more about the Royal Albert Hall shoot.
Yeah,
that we alluded to in last week's episode,
and possibly the one before that,
and possibly that. So by the time you watch this, that shoot would have already happened. But as we're pre-recording this, we haven't
it's
actually
just about to happen.
It's just about to happen, yeah. And the reason why we're pre-recording this is because it is going to happen.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And if you're wondering why I'm wearing the same shirt that I did in the last episode, that's because we've just only filmed the last week's episode, literally an hour ago. So...
yeah, I had the foresight to put on another hoodie at least.
Yeah, I didn't. I'm wearing a crown.
And a crown.
Right? There you go. So, yeah.
But don't you wear that shirt every week anyway?
Incidentally. So, if you go back to episode number 1, you will see me wear the exact same shirt.
Yep. And I'm going to guess that had we recorded an episode 10 years ago, it would have been that shirt as well.
I mean, it's actually hard to tell whether it's the exact same shirt or whether it's just one of the shirts that look exactly identical.
That's the same shirt.
It could be.
It's the same shirt.
I think it probably was, yeah.
Yes, he is double denim.
Triple denim, actually. Oh, okay. Well.
What, you got denim pants on too?
Always.
You own denim pants, and you at least own denim shorts.
I do have denim shorts, yeah.
Are they short shorts? Like a proper German?
No, they're more like Bermuda shorts.
Oh, it's disappointing. Oh, those. I've seen those. You need to cut those off to proper, short Daisy Dukes.
Oh, Daisy Dukes, yeah. Yeah, why not?
But made of denim.
I don't think I have the legs for that, though.
Christ.
Oh,
my God. Those in your flip-flops.
Yeah.
I can't wait to get the flip-flops back out.
Oh, my God. Today was the first day where actually I left the Parker in the car.
Were you ill?
Yeah, I know. It was.
You must have a fever.
It was relatively warm.
15 degrees.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it felt more like 20 or something. To be honest, when I went to town briefly today, that was good.
I've been in here working all day. I haven't left the house.
No,
except for go to a quick job for a couple of hours. But lucky me.
Well, there you go.
And now I'm very tired.
That is why it's almost midnight. So we have come to the end of episode 100 of the Camera Shake podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. It was a little bit reminiscent today, but we will be back.
And tripoddy.
And very, very tripoddy. I quite enjoy the tripod chat.
We'll do something on tripod soon.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have to speak to some people who make tripods. I think that would be an interesting thing to do. Now, that being said, next week we're going to be back with a very special episode because that will be partially filmed at the Albert Hall.
Yep. But, you know, we obviously have a track record of going out with the intention of making basically an entire episode while we're out and coming back with 2 minutes of footage.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can better 2 minutes.
All right, well.
That's our goal.
That's the goal. Anyway, so remember, do us a favor and join the Camera Shake community on the Facebook. That's our brand new Facebook group. If you haven't checked it out yet, all you have to do is go to Facebook and search for Camera Shake community. It'd be super awesome if you join us there. That's really where we have discussions going on, and we talk about all sorts of different things, photography and video related, and anything's got anything to do with any of that, obviously. Likewise, we're also on TikTok. Join us on TikTok.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, for you TikTokers, see you next Thursday. This is episode 100.
It wouldn't pull over. They're so crap.